Okay, so I'd like to proceed with what I'm deeming the most important topic of the day. This is the part of the meeting where we are going to discuss the 501c3 Exploratory Committee's findings, and we are going to present a vote at the end. And the way it's going to work is a little different than usual. Usually we would just take a voice vote and record any dissent as the vote. But because this is so important, what we're going to do is we are going to publish a link to an electronic vote so that everybody has the opportunity to review the video of this meeting, the slides involved with explaining our findings, a prospectus that goes into greater detail if there's any additional questions. And it will also include a form if there are questions. So at FAQ, if somebody has a question before they feel comfortable voting, we will get that addressed and post it in case someone else has a similar question. And the voting will open today, and it will not close until 11:59 p.m. on September 30th. So we're going to have the rest of the month to vote. That way we can get the maximum participation from the Guild in case people who can't make it here today, they will still have the benefit of having their questions answered, reviewing the materials, and being able to vote and have their voices heard, because this is, I feel is very important. With that being said, I'm going to roll into, we have a kind of a slideshow inside of a slideshow to go over what our findings were. So here we go. This is the Exploratory Committee meetings, presentation to the Guild for September 11th, 2021. One thing that we wanted to establish and make very clear for the Guild is to go over our mission statement, just to reacquaint folks with it in case they may not have known that we even had one. But this is why we're here today and why we're talking about what we're talking about and why we are looking into this possibility. So the purpose of the Guild is to provide a supportive environment for persons interested in weaving, spinning, knitting, and other fiber arts, and to reach out and promote the knowledge and use of fiber arts in the community. And as you can see, the last little bit there is highlighted because that part of the mission statement really does talk to the efforts that initially going and incorporating and then following along with an application to receive tax exempt status really falls into how we see ourselves and how we want to serve in the community and what it is that we want to share. So our current situation, as things stand right now, here's what we've got, right? Under state law, an organization is not required to incorporate unless it has $250,000 or more in total assets. I will tell you, we do not come anywhere near close to that, but please consider, we need insurance to cover FSWG's physical assets and liability for special events. Our finances are tight and donations would help. We can legally accept donations right now, but the donors cannot deduct those donations from their personal taxes. And since we are not incorporated, our officers and members could be personally liable for accidental injury or other legal proceedings. Some people may be unwilling to serve as officers because of this risk alone. And I have to tell you, when I first volunteered to do the president's position, I did not even think about that scenario at all. However, now that it has been presented, it is a concern that I do have. And others have made it known that they have not sought an officer's position in the Guild specifically because that liability question has not been covered. So it does affect the way the Guild runs in that we don't get people who want to serve on the board. So keep that in mind. Hold on. Keep that in mind as we go along. I would ask for the presentation, Bonnie, and everyone else, if you could please hold questions until the end, and we'll talk about it after the presentation. All right, so first thing we need to do is define some terms. People hear nonprofits, not-for-profits, 501c3s. People use them interchangeably, but there is differences. They can be subtle, but there are differences. So the first thing we need to talk about is what a not-for-profit, nonprofit, not-for-profit, what that means, as opposed to a 501c3, which everybody thinks of as a nonprofit. So a nonprofit organization is a state or Commonwealth designation for the incorporation that the organization chooses to use. Okay, so it's a state designation, the nonprofit. There are several different incorporation schemes that you can use in the Commonwealth. Limited liability, stock corporations, non-stock corporations. For us, we're talking specifically about a non-stock corporation, which includes nonprofit organizations. So if you want to become a nonprofit, the non-stock corporation is the option that you use in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, how does that differ from being a 501c3? 501c3 is a code in the IRS federal regulation. It's a federal designation, and it designates the type of tax exempt status. So there's two parts here. You can be a nonprofit at the state level, but you do not have to be a 501c3. Although most organizations run the process of applying for both in parallel, there is no requirement that you do that, okay? So there's no requirement that you have to file for a 501c3 designation as a tax exempt organization with the federal government at the same time or in conjunction with filing for your nonprofit status with the state or Commonwealth. Okay, so I wanted to make that very clear going forward. All right. Hello.
Sorry, I was just going to go back for a second. Oh no, go ahead. I think it gets covered under the next slides.
Okay, so here we're going to go in a little bit into some of the pros and cons of incorporating as a nonprofit in Virginia. Once we cover the incorporation part of it, we will also look ahead a little bit and to give folks the understanding of where we might be able to head, so that can help inform the current decision that we have to make today or for the rest of the month. So here are some of the benefits of incorporating as a nonprofit here in Virginia. One of the big things is the incorporation in of itself will give limited liability protection. to the officers and members of the guild, so that our personal assets are not at risk. So I will give a scenario of where this could potentially come into play. Say we are at, you have a piece of equipment at Liberty Town. Somebody trips and gets hurt and cuts themselves. Liberty Town covers us under their insurance. But if we are out and demonstrating in an official capacity, say at Chatham later this month, and somebody were to trip and fall and break an arm, the individual who owns the spinning wheel could be liable for expenses. The officers involved could be liable for expenses, and they can go after your personal assets. So that is a situation that could very well easily, I could see happening. The next benefit is credibility. When we proceed in the future with other endeavors, a great example Kara gave the other night was if Liberty Town were to ever close or go away and we would have to find new guild accommodations, having that incorporation status lends the guild legitimacy. And if we were to have to fill out applications to rent a new space, the leasing agent would be able to look at our status and know that, okay, this is not some fly-by-night organization. They are legitimate. They have taken the time and effort to make themselves a legally organized entity, and they may have more inclination to work with us. So that is, you know, that's a scenario that we could run into. But it also helps us when we're going to other organizations around the area want to partner with us to do things like demonstrating in Chatham. Maybe some, you know, other groups may have not thought to reach out to us before because we're not listed in the state's information as far as companies. So that's something to think about. And it is the first step in applying for that tax exempt designation with the federal government. The paperwork that you have to do to apply for your nonprofit status in the Commonwealth of Virginia is based on the information the federal government requires for the 501c3 designation. So if you fill out the Virginia paperwork as it is laid out, you will be one step ahead and in line with the federal requirements. So that is good to know. All right. So some of the drawbacks, there is a filing fee of $75 for the application when you initially apply for the non-stock corporation status. And then there is a $10 name search fee just to make sure we're not incorporating under somebody else's name that they've already had. I'm going to guess that there is not another Fredericksburg Spinners and Weavers Guild organization floating around out there, but you never know. So there is paperwork involved in the application. It is not horrible by any stretch of the imagination. Basically taking the bylaws, making sure that they're in order, and copying and paste them into the correct portion of the documentation. At the present time, donations would not be tax deductible unless we follow up and decide to go on further with a 501c3 status. And then there are yearly fees and paperwork, $25 to maintain the nonprofit status, and you have to file a report a yearly report at the end of the year. However, as stated, we already file paperwork every quarter with the Department of Taxation for our sales tax, which we don't ever use, or we haven't. I'm not going to say we don't ever use it. We haven't used it in several years because Liberty Town handles the tax for the individuals in the guild who sell at Liberty Town. So as a guild, it's not something we do often. We could, at some of these events, put together different kits and such that we could sell. And if we did that, we would have to retain the receipts and pay taxes on those things that we were to sell. So we do have the ability to do that. So let that be known that we already address tax filing issues as a guild already. So those are the benefits and the drawbacks to the nonprofit incorporation in Virginia, so at the state level. Now here we're taking a look at a step ahead. So the first step is understanding where we are at the state level, with the understanding if we go forward with the 501c3 organizational exemption, these are some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks that we have to look forward to. But understanding these benefits and drawbacks may be able to inform your decision on the initial incorporation question. Okay, so first and foremost, the donations become tax deductible to those that are donating. It makes it easier to solicit donations from corporations and other organizations. We could use that for growing our outreach in the community as far as workshops, classes, supplies, educational programs, and so forth. The tax exemptions, as you can see there, we are exempt. We would be exempt from paying federal taxes. We also would have the ability to apply for grants and other from the federal government for from the public and private allocations, which can help also into help subsidize the guild as far as any donations that we receive. And we would reduce postal rates, although right now we're not sending a lot of things out via mail. However, I did consider doing that for taking the vote here, sending a physical card to everyone in the guild to vote. But because that gets expensive with stamps, I decided to go the virtual route. But in the future, we may want to take advantage of being able to send out hard copy materials free of charge.
Well, not free, discounted.
Just discounted. Yeah. All right, so some of the drawbacks. Again, there is a fee with filing for the 501c3 status. If we submit kind of the easy form, you know, you have your 1040 easy, the short form, things like that, it's $275. Paperwork, you have to submit your organizational documentation from the state. You have to submit the application, and you have to prepare it. And while it's not required, as consulting with an attorney is recommended and beneficial. Not that that would be something that the guild would incur the cost on. I'm sure we could find a way to work it through our private connections. to get an attorney to look over our documentation, but it really is not required. It could be seen as limiting our purpose, but since, like in our mission statement there at the end, one of the things we do is focus on education in the community. We should be fine, because that education piece is what we would file the exemption for. Again, you have yearly paperwork to keep up on. There's public scrutiny, and our finances would have to be open to the public for inspection, as would our incorporation documentation and anything else involved with using the funds appropriately. That has to be available for whoever asks to be able to review. Let's see, directors cannot be paid. So I'm sorry if anybody wanted to get paid, can't, not that that's a problem for us since we're all volunteers. Not really a downside, but it's there. And then assets, again, we can't use the guild's assets for personal use as officers and directors. Not a problem.
For personal gain.
For personal gain.
So it would be okay for an officer to rent or borrow equipment under the same rules that govern, regular members. We'd be allowed to, still use guild equipment or whatever. We wouldn't be allowed to sell that equipment and pocket the proceeds.
Correct. Okay. So this brings us to the vote. So this is what we're voting on. Okay. Do nothing and remain as we are. So the question is, do we want to file as an established organization as a non-stock corporation in the Commonwealth of Virginia? The answers are yes or no. If your answer is no, this is what that answer means. Do nothing and remain as we are. Finances will still be tight. We won't have insurance on our assets or for some of our activities. Officers and members could be personally liable for anything that happens, accidents, damage to the equipment, etc. If your answer is yes, we would apply to be a nonprofit or corporation, and that gives us legitimacy and liability protections. Donations would still not be tax deductible, making it harder to get donations. We would have the next 2 years after receiving the articles of incorporation back from the Commonwealth to apply for the 501c3 status. So this is a two-part process that we've broken it down to. One, do we want to incorporate in the state, yes or no? If the majority comes back and the answer is yes, then we will do another vote. Do we want to proceed with 501c3 status, or do we want to wait, or do we not want to do it at all? So it's a two-parter. We're only looking at the first part right now. So the upcoming vote is yes, we want to do state nonprofit, or no, we do not. Okay, so don't worry about if you can and get this link and everything right now, because again, we will be putting out a package later this evening that includes this slide deck, that includes the link and the password for the vote. It will include the prospectus, which goes into greater detail of what we've covered today, our findings and what they mean. and a link to the Q&A section if you've got questions, that we can start a FAQ for this process that will also be on the vote link page. So now with that, do we have any questions?
That's Leslie.
Yes.
I would like to say thank you. I think that was an excellent presentation, and you all have done such a wonderful job with getting it all together, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leslie,
Ma'am,
can you scroll back to slide 7?
slide 7. Okay.
Rats. Try slide 8. Well, this is good enough. Item number 2 under nonprofit. When you first brought that up, different slide anyhow, you said it protected the officers from liability. Okay, then you went to another slide that talked about that. Maybe it's slide 9, I don't know. But anyhow, it said officers and members.
Correct.
Because you were talking about people reluctant to being officers.
Can I call you?
Well, if it said and members, then just being a non-officer, we're still as liable as an officer is.
Correct.
Okay, that was not really stressed.
The likelihood is that it would be the officers they would come after first. But it is possible that individual members would also be at risk. That's what our research seemed to indicate.
Now, I think if you were at a demonstration, somebody tripped over your loom and stabbed themselves with one of your knitting needles, that they would probably go after you first.
It's definitely a possibility.
We're making some
They prick their finger on the needle of a spinning wheel.
Exactly, and fall into that deep sleep. They're coming. There is a reason why tort law is very lucrative in the United States.
Yeah, because well, no, I'm not going to get into it.
We're a very litigious society.
And I just want to add, whenever I fill out the forms for demonstrating, I usually have to sign a thing saying that they're exempt from any liability or anything.
That the organization that we're demonstrating at is exempt,
Right.
Mhm.
which puts it right back on us.
Yep. Any other questions?
Do we, how many members actually have to vote in order to have a yay or nay? Is there in our bylaws something, we need 50% participation? Just out of curiosity.
No, there's nothing in the bylaws that state that we have to have a certain quorum to hold the vote. It is a simple majority. And that is why, instead of just taking the vote today online, I wanted to be able to distribute the link and the information as widely as possible to the guild at large, so that we do have the opportunity to get everybody's vote cast, so that we can go forward with the knowledge that if we take the vote and the majority says yes, then everybody has had the opportunity to vote and do so. Any other questions?
Leslie, could I just make a comment?
Yes, please.
I'm I'm not for sure about this, but it's my understanding that under one of the, I know there's different categories of 501c3, at least that's, again, my understanding. But if we were to become enabled under that, cannot actually solicit donations. You can make it clear that we will accept them, but we can't actually go out and solicit them. That was my understanding from another guild who's under that particular heading, but they are a 501c3.
So with that, there are organizations whose purpose is to go out and solicit donations for charitable work. And that is the intended purpose of the tax exempt status, because 501c3 is only one of the versions of tax exempt status.
Mhm.
Those are for organizations that promote education, charitable works, such as, like food banks and clothing banks and things like that.
Right.
Other organizations can have tax exempt status, but they're seeking that status under a different code. So under a 501c3, our stated and intended purpose cannot be for the solicitation of donations. It is for the education piece of it.
Right.
So we can ask for donations, but that cannot be our primary purpose.
Okay.
I was gonna say that, like, for instance, with the band, what we have on our musical programs is, we'll have a little thing down at the bottom, saying, if you want to give us a donation, here's how you do it. By the way, we're a 501c3 organization.
I'm just going to say this real quick, a note for Nicole, when you go back and rewatch this, if you could please capture those questions that we've already had and the responses so that we can start our FAQ, that would be great.
Oh, hey, sorry to interrupt. I just called my father up. He ran the Fredericksburg Museum for years, and I thought he was a 501c3 too. And I was like, hey, quick question, were you a 501c3? And he's like, yes, because he was like the director of the whole thing. And I said, so you were 501c3, could you solicit donations? And I remember him whining and dining the living Jesus out of people trying to get money for the museum. So I was hoping he would say yes, otherwise it would have been illegal. And he's like, yeah, of course. He's like, you can definitely do that. And I said, well, have you ever heard of a 501c3 where you couldn't do that? And he said, no, he'd never heard of such a thing. But he said, there is one thing. You have to go to he said, this is years ago, so maybe it's changed. The Department of Agriculture has to give you a license. I said, the Department of Agriculture? What are we, raising sheep? And he says, no, you got to go to them for some reason. So this is vague off the top of his head. He's not a lawyer, but he was the president and CEO for like 30 years. So I can maybe like look into that or something and see if there's any merit to it, because maybe you're a 501c3, but you have to have this, and those people that are saying they can't maybe don't have that. Maybe that's the explanation, or maybe they just use the law. So not to throw a wrench into that, but just a little bit of side information.
So,
I'm sorry, I speak very fast.
No, you're fine. And just as to follow on with that, to remind everybody, this vote is not a vote to apply for 501c3 tax exempt status. Okay, so just that is not the purpose of this. Once we get the results and we go over them in October, then we will decide from there the path, the next steps. I will say that the exploratory committee, we do have the second Wednesday of the month at 6:30, the Zoom time slot through MAFA for the next 6 months. If we have follow-on work, which I hope we do, just saying. So we do have that ability to do further work. So folks.
Well, if you like, I can see, I've got my monitor over here, so when I look at you guys, it's weird. If you want, I can, even though it's not necessarily related to this, at least yet, I can begin looking into that to see what the deal is, because they probably have changed the laws. There could be all kinds of wacky stuff. And I can ask him, and he can probably get a hold of a lawyer and ask them, was using the buddy buddy system,
Okay.
and see.
What I can do in that case then, Ishtar, is I will send you a link to our Jira. We have Jira board to
Oh,
keep
God.
track of what
Jira.
we're doing. So you can see what we've already done. And if you would love to help, we'd love to have you. So, all right, everybody. So unless we have any more questions for this discussion, be on the lookout this evening for this packet of information to come to you. You may actually get it 2, 3, maybe more times because I'm going to spam the heck out of everybody, because I want everybody to be able to see this and take part and not have to go, well, I never got the email. So I'm very serious about this. I want max participation because I feel that this is a very important next steps. And I want everybody to be sufficiently educated with the materials that we will have available for everyone. And I want everybody, if you're going over the things and something pops up into your head and you have a question, please, 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 please ask it, because I guarantee you, if you have that question, somebody else also has the question. So don't think that it's a dumb question, or that, think that everybody else maybe knows it and you just missed it. No, I want people to be able to ask their questions so that we can go back and, if need be, do the thorough, additional research that needs to be done to answer that question correctly, thoroughly, and completely.